Thomas,
Hey, how you going?
very well. How are you?
Yeah, good thing.
Excellent.
What's been happening?
Oh, it's full on today. Oh my God. Going up to Queensland first thing tomorrow.
Yeah, okay.
Doing a presentation up at Mullaney at Crystal Waters Permaculture Village.
Yep.
Part of a PDC they've got there, and I'm doing a workshop in Mullumbimby on the way back through. And I've got heaps of little things I'm catching up with. It's been a bit of a
Yeah.
full-on day, so
That's awesome.
just dropping into the space now.
Yeah. No, thanks for coming on, man. It's been excited to talk to you all week.
Yeah, great. Well, it's nice to meet you at last.
Yeah, likewise, we got Ian Thomas here from the Gourmet Garden School. Do you mind telling us how that all got started?
Well, the Gourmet Garden School has been a dream of mine for a few years. I actually started the organisation a couple of years ago, and it's really born out of my passion for food, for good food. So I grew up in a house in southeast London, and my mum grew veggies, and I learnt to know the difference between really homegrown delicious foods and shop bought nutrient depleted cardboard equivalent.
Yeah.
And when I left home, I found myself unable to buy most of the kind of food qualities that I wanted, and that drove me to learning how to grow myself. And I found very quickly that growing food wasn't as easy as I thought or hoped it would be, and that's actually caused me to jump into the path of understanding what really goes into make food taste good. And it's possible to grow food that doesn't taste good. I've learnt the hard way, and so here I am. I've basically spent 20 odd years. I studied environmental science, and I used that as my platform to dive into understanding soil and plant health. And I've been working in the food industry as growing food and helping people landscape their gardens to grow better quality food that whole time. And so the Gourmet Garden School is basically a culmination of all of my skills and understanding of what goes into make good soil food.
Oh, that's awesome. I've seen on your website, yeah, had all is written. Not all fresh or homegrown foods are truly nutrient rich. Can you explain a bit more of that for
Well,
everyone?
it's basically a consequence. The food that we eat is a consequence of the nutrient profile and the microbial activity of the soil it's grown. And most of the food we eat is commercially grown, and the process in which food is commercially grown is an inherently extractive process. And after about 100 years of bad farming, when I say bad, I'm referring to practices that degrade the soil health rather than promote and improve it. The food that's been grown for that time has been increasingly more and more depleted in its nutrient value. And so what we're finding is that most commercial food is significantly lower in the nutrient levels than is capable genetically for that plant, and also much lower than we would expect. And that is quite literally why kids don't want to eat their veggies, is because their veggies taste crap.
Yeah.
And we know it, but we eat them because we tell ourselves we should. But actually, they can taste amazing. Anyone that's had that tomato that was just amazing, like an explosion of aroma and flavor, or a carrot that just couldn't get enough of, that's what I'm talking about. And if it's not like that, then it's because it's lacking minerals and nutrients that the plant needed to be able to grow those qualities.
Wow. And how can people start to, I guess find out if their soil is good enough for what they're growing, or is it
Well,
that way you come in?
Well, yeah, I mean that's my passion. I'm really interested in soil health for growing good food. I'm not actually one of those nerds who loves soil for soil's sake.
Yeah.
Like for me, it really is, part of the process. I just want food that tastes great.
Yep.
The exciting thing is that when we grow foods that taste great, the mineral profile is higher, so it's actually more nutritious for us. But it also becomes naturally pest resistant too, which is a really
Um,
exciting thing. I'm happy to dive into. But the result is that it's easier to grow. And all that people need to do if they want this kind of quality themselves is to focus on building soil health. And when I talk about that, I'm referring to having luxury levels of organic matter in the soil and doing what we can as garden custodians to stimulate biological life in the soil. We can add minerals that the soil needs, perhaps guided by a soil test. That's one of the best ways to start, because the soil test can identify what minerals the soil is actually lacking geologically and needs. And if we can provide those, and then ensure the biology is present in the soil, they can unlock those minerals and make them plant available. And then we can all enjoy food that tastes a lot better. And it's a journey. It's not a result. You don't get it after a year or two. It's like an ongoing practice that gets better and better.
Well, that's awesome. I love to hear more about that, with the getting rid of the pests. So that's one thing I've had trouble with.
Yeah, most of us do.
Yeah.
I mean, the truth of it is, we come to think of insect pests as just a part of gardening, and there's many old wives' tales about, oh, just soak garlic or put chilies in a jar of water and spray the chili water out and it will repel them. All of these may be true. Some of them work very effectively, but killing pests or deterring pests is actually dealing with the symptom, not the cause. The pests are not the cause of the problem. The problem is that the food they're eating, which we think of as our food, is only insect grade food, because insects actually have a much more simplified digestive system than mammals, and they lack the enzymes in their digestive system to break apart protein, and plants construct protein from the raw ingredient, and we eat that as our food. That's what we recognize as good nutritious food. But when a plant's not growing with all that it needs, it kind of can't quite complete the chemical manufacturing process to creating complete proteins and fully embodied cells that have the integrity that they need. And consequently, it becomes food for insects. So insects have this very highly specialized antenna system that allows them to pick up on the electromagnetic spectrum, the frequency emitted from each plant, and they are attuned like perfect precision to recognize what plants are going to be host for them, what they can grow on and actually get nutrition from. They can recognize it without even being on the plant. They can see it. And insects will only land on and consume plants that have had something lacking in the plant's ability to complete picture.
Yeah.
So essentially, weak plants succumb to bacterial, fungal, and insect pests. And a really healthy plant that's true human grade food doesn't succumb to those things, has its own immune system that enables it to repel those.
Wow. So it's got its natural occurring immune system going on.
Yeah.
And again, that'd go back to your healthy soil.
Exactly. And interestingly, the immune system that the plants have is a chemical immune system. That's all plants have. They can't get up and leave. They have to defend themselves using bitter compounds or complex, they call them secondary metabolites. Essentially, the things we recognize as flavor and aroma, these are the things that the plant can use to deter pests that would browse or damage their cell structure. And those are the same things that are good for our health. So when we consume a plant that has a robust immune system, that's good for our immune system and our body health. So the healthier the food we grow, the tastier it is, the more pest resistant, and the more nutritious and beneficial it is for us.
Yeah, that's awesome. I've seen too on your website that growing our own food has the power to change the world. And I love when I've seen that. What do you mean by that? Can you?
Well, I personally believe that given that most of the world's environmental problems are caused by agriculture, either directly through land clearance and land degradation, or indirectly through the energy consumption, the transportation system of the massive amount of food that's moved all around the planet all the time, every day, most of the world's energy use and pollution is caused by agriculture in some way. And so I believe that by people growing some food at home, and forget self-sufficiency, I think that's a really awesome dream, but not something that most people realistically want. Let's just talk about a small veggie garden where 95% of our greens and our herb we grow ourselves, and we just buy a few other staples. By doing that, we massively reduce the amount that we consume, that we need to buy. That's going to be grown commercially. And I should just emphasize here that organic food is not a lot better than commercial food that we might judge as laden with poison or pesticides. Organic food, commercially grown, is very damaging for the planet. And that's because of the broad acre system, the way that we're growing a lot of food and trying to get as much out of the farm as we can. Small scale farms are much more efficient. Polyculture systems where there's many different species growing, but that doesn't lend itself to large machinery, mass production. So the single crop mentality, the monoculture approach, is the problem for damaging soil, damaging the planet. The more we can grow at home, the less we're relying on those systems. And the other part to this that is more of a spiritual thing, I believe that we are just human on the planet. We're an expression of planet. And by having our hands in the soil, it cultures a reverence and a respect for the fact that this earth sustains me. This earth sustains me. Like, I personally can't imagine feeling good about walking out in my garden and just chucking a stubby and leaving it, or rubbishing my garden. I'm not going to do that because it's the place where I get food. And I believe that when one starts to cultivate the soil, we start to see the planet as the wider garden, and cultivating beauty, cultivating food, cultivating a landscape that's delicious and inviting is a really rich opportunity that we can all enjoy. And in doing so, we actually recognize our rightful place on this planet, which is custodians of, not dominant over.
Wow, that's incredible, man. I love that. That's cool.
It's really simple.
Yeah,
I think that it's that simple, it's that
yeah,
amazing, and it's elegant, and it's profound, and it's really simple at the same time. And I'm so pumped by it. I just think it's brilliant.
yeah. I love what you're saying, man. I totally believe it too. And that's going to bring me to my next thing I was going to ask. With I seen on there you got cultivating our own food connects people and heals communities. Like there's another something else that stood out for me when I was going through all your stuff. I love that as well.
I
Like,
think the community thing is so rich. I mean, I really love the irony of the fact that growing monoculturally, growing broadacre mass systems, what we're doing is we're damaging the community in the soil that the plants rely on. And plants are essentially growing like clones of each other, disconnected from their neighbors. Look at the way we live in our little suburban houses,
yeah,
disconnected from our neighbors. It's happening for us too. And I've seen it myself, and I've seen it through documentary. And there's one that really stood out for me. There was this suburb up in the Sunshine Coast in Queensland called Budrum, and they had this street where the neighbours collaborated and they started growing food. They were growing fruit trees, they were growing veggies, and they swapped. They exchanged the produce and they grew it as a collaborative effort. This whole street.
wow,
And I saw this documentary that someone had made, and they talked about how the age divide was bridged by this process. That the kids in the street had started getting to know and hanging out with the old people in the street. That
yeah,
they had food in common and they had something to talk about. I mean, you can imagine how disconnected kids are from old people with,
yeah,
the technology divide, the concepts, everything is so big, and yet food brought everyone together. There
wow,
was also examples of interracial divide being bridged, where people, and this is from a different community garden project in Sydney I saw, where people who were immigrants to the country, who'd experienced war and recent atrocities in their own country, moved here, didn't really feel Australian, didn't really feel like they'd settled into this culture, but by growing some of their own kinds of food, they were able to express their culture and share their excitement for their food and their culture with other Australians who were doing the same. And they found this beautiful connection, this richness, this same opportunity to explore similarity of what it is to human on the planet, and it had the power to heal. And these people felt like they had landed when they were surrounded by some of the foods and I just see it as so rich for bringing community together. And you'd know from the harvest swap stuff,
yeah,
you're passionate of sharing that. I think it's so awesome because if I grow a tomato plant, I have no tomatoes, all suddenly I've got too many.
yeah,
Like, what does a man do with 3 kilos of tomatoes, or 50 if we grew a few plants?
yeah,
We make sauce. We give them to our neighbor. We give them to our friend. Like, we learn how to preserve them. And then there's these beautiful gifts of like, oh, I made this. This is
yeah,
passata. I made it. I put a chili in. It's a chili passata. Like,
yeah.
oh my God, it's so exciting. It just bridges community.
Yeah, that's what I really love. That's why I started Harvest Swap. I've been trying to make them like groups for as many places around Australia as I can, and then I've even got a couple around the world. But yeah, I just love that whole idea. Exactly what you're saying now. I think it's great. Like I just love seeing all the people sharing their ideas too and what they're growing. And see people sharing advice, and yeah, come across people like you. It's cool.
Yeah, I take my hat off to you what you're doing there. I think it's absolutely fantastic. I started a veggie swap in my local town in Mansfield, Victoria,
Yeah,
about 10 years ago, and I was blown away at the generosity of people. People would
Yeah.
come with a box full of stuff and they'd leave with a handful of stuff. And
Yep.
after a couple of hours, there was this whole table full of food that no one was taking. And nobody turned up. The fear when I was setting it up was, oh, what if people turn up and they just want to take and they don't bring anything? Nobody did that. It was amazing. We ended up with this excess every week, and we'd end up donating it to the hospital or to selling it and then donating the proceeds to the local hospital.
Wow.
And I just went, I couldn't believe the generosity that came from
Yeah.
gardeners and the knowledge and the skills. And you're doing it through the harvest swap. I think it's brilliant. You're making it accessible for more people.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. Get as many people involved as I can, and even if they don't go to swaps or anything where they are, at least they can know how to, and they might feel more comfortable with their neighbours, and
Yes.
just getting awareness through that way. That's what I'm trying to promote that as
And
much
it's
as I can.
building connection. It's
Yeah,
it's building connection between people of like mind, and that's what we really need moving forward into this age. I
yeah,
feel like, there's a lot of scare stories on the media, and we're like, oh God, where are we going as a culture, as a world society?
yeah,
But if we don't maintain connection, then we are going in a dark place. But
yeah,
by maintaining a connection and a groundedness of real world, which is us as custodians of this planet need to care for, not destroy, growers are on the front line of that. And
yeah.
by building connection between growers, like it's a very healthy, resilient thing that we really need as much of as possible.
Yeah, 100% agree. I never see any too with the gardening groups and like all different ones. You never see so much like you don't really see much negativity. I feel like it's a different mindset for people.
Yes.
People are a lot happier and they're more giving and they're happy to talk and share.
Yeah, and
It's,
it's a feel good thing, isn't it? I mean, there's
yeah,
so many reasons for it. I mean, there's the food,
yeah,
there's the variety and the nibbling, and there's the abundance. The earth gives us so much. We plant one seed, we get 10,000 back.
yeah,
There's this abundance thing, and we're around people who are joyful, people who are enjoying their day. They're not listening to the news. They're out in the garden. They've got their hands in the soil. They're
yeah,
talking about the flavor of their peat, or they're
yeah,
excited that their spinach has just got its first leaf.
yeah.
It seems so simple, but it really is all that we need as humans on the planet.
Yeah, definitely. It's so cool. I still get excited, whenever I grow something and it takes off. It's a good feeling when you've planted that seed and then something's come to fruition.
Yeah, I completely agree. It doesn't get boring. It just gets more and more exciting.
Yeah, and you're always learning new things. Like to be honest, before I came across you, I never even thought about soil health, and I think that's a lot of where some of my issues come from. Some things that don't take off, or it makes a lot of sense now that I've been neglecting that part of it, and I think that's incredible. It's obvious now.
Yeah. Well, my journey's been a hard lesson
Yeah,
the whole time. I actually am amazed sometimes why I've stayed doing it. It's
yeah,
really the love of the food because
yeah,
I've had so many disasters. Like, so
yeah,
many times I've been like, yes, I'm gonna do this year, and I'm gonna clear this patch, and I'm gonna grow these amazing tomatoes, and then they don't grow, or
yeah,
they grow and there's all some weird wrong with them, and I'm like, the leaves are doing that. Why would it do that? I don't even know what's wrong. Where do I
yeah,
even find that out?
yeah,
And it's like hard work sometimes.
yeah,
And it's that got me going, right, I've got to understand this soil business.
yeah,
And the more I learn, the more I know I don't know. It's like I can walk out in my garden right now and point to 30 things that I don't understand.
yeah,
Why is this happening? I don't. And I'm the guy that, I claim to be the one to help guide people to understand.
yeah,
And yet there's this reality that I'm never going to know it all. And I am always faced with opportunities to learn. And
yeah,
the one thing that I have learned is that a lot comes down to soil.
yeah,
We get the microbial activity going in the soil, feeding the soil life. The more plants we can grow that's going to feed the soil life, then the healthier the soil gets and the better things get and the easier it gets.
yeah. Yeah. What advice would you give to someone that they've got zero experience gardening? They're setting up their first garden this weekend and they don't know anything at all.
I would say, don't worry, neither does anybody else. People have had years of experience and they feel good for it, like
Yeah,
me. And then they go out next week and I'll do something and it won't work. And I'll be like, So don't worry that you've got no experience that it might not work, because it might not work. And that
yeah,
will be a great opportunity to learn why. What I would suggest is start small, like really small if you need to, because starting small makes it really achievable. That way you can have a little patch, just a pot even, 1 square meter, Do something that's really, really achievable. And that way you can play with it to your heart's content and it will never be overwhelming. I know people, I'll admit it, I've done it myself. I've cleared a large area. I've done things. Then the weeds have grown and I've gone, oh my goodness, a lot of work. Suddenly it becomes too much.
Yeah.
And then that didn't grow properly and that wasn't growing well. And it's like, so start small is my next tip, and is to pick 3 or 4 plants that you love to eat.
Yeah.
Like if you love cucumbers, grow some cucumber seeds. Get those seeds, grow those plants, learn how to grow them well by doing heaps of Googling, join the Facebook group, whatever it is, ask your fellow gardeners. Only start with the foods that you really enjoy, that you want to eat. Don't bother growing something because you think you should. You won't have interest. If a leek excites you, grow some leek and enjoy the uniqueness of watching your favorite vegetable growing from seed or seedling to full size.
Yeah, that's pretty cool, man. What are your thoughts with having worms and compost and all that stuff? Is that important to you? Like,
yes.
yeah.
The reason is, well, there's a few reasons. Firstly, we're closing the waste gap. So biomass, and essentially it comes down to energy. All these resources that we might put in our bin to send away elsewhere are a resource that we can use. The main reason why compost and worms are so powerful is because they not only recycle the nutrients in these materials and make them plant available again, but they also inoculate them with new beneficial organisms. So microbially, when we understand soil, what we want is as many different organisms as possible, as many of those organisms as possible, and for those organisms to be as active as possible. Active, diverse, and abundant. Compost and worm castings are full of organisms. So these are like they're like a probiotic for your plants. They're a probiotic for the soil. By putting out some compost, even just a small amount, like a little pin next to a seedling, that seedling is likely to grow better than the one that didn't get the compost. You can definitely overdo it with compost, but to not have any is usually not as good as to have some. And then there's a whole range of other benefits that come with compost. That it's very rich in organic matter. This helps to hold moisture. It helps to regulate nutrient cycling. It minimizes loss of minerals when you get excess rains. The list goes on, but it's enough to understand that it's a very good product to put in your garden, and you can't buy it. You actually can't buy it. If you go to Bunnings, you look at worm castings in a bag, the quality of those is very different to what you'd grow yourself at home. Same with compost. Go to a landscape supply. You look at the compost there, it ain't a patch on the stuff you make yourself. Even if you just throw it in a corner and walk away, that will be much better quality than what you can buy. That's why we've got to make it ourselves.
Wow, yeah, that's cool. I got my own little worm farm I got going, and I love doing that. Turn into fertilizer and stuff, getting the juice from it. And since I've been doing that, I've been getting a lot better results on something.
Oh, great.
But when I first started, I think I overdone it on a few plants, but learned from that. What about, so I've gone over that, herb. Is there any information you could shed on that? Like the importance of different herbs growing with your vegetables and...
Yeah, well, from a soil health perspective, each root system of each plant supports a different culture of organism, a different kind of colony of organism. So if you have a leek, there's a very different kind of community of organisms that live on the root system of a leek than live on a rosemary plant or on a lettuce or on a tomato plant. The healthiest soil is one where the organisms are as abundant and as diverse and as active as possible. So you want as many different root systems in the same soil as possible, as practical. And so having herbs through the garden is a wonderful way of diversifying the root systems in the soil, and this can have a huge beneficial effect on soil health overall. Many herbs are perennial, meaning that they live 3 or more years, which means they're super easy because you literally plant them, walk away. Most of them don't need much work at all. In fact, I would think of herbs as the gateway plant. They talk about gateway drug. Well, herbs,
Yeah.
for the person that's a brown thumb, grow some thyme or some rosemary or some sage, and it's very unlikely you're going to kill it. They're very robust. They're very strong plants. They're hard to kill, and they taste amazing. Like, buy those herbs shop. You're never going to compare them. They're worlds apart. And so herbs are really easy because they live for a long time. So they're very giving plants to have through the garden. And from a companion plant perspective, the main benefit is the root systems can be synergistic and improve the health of other plants growing nearby. There is some discussion around and the concept of the aroma of those plant herbs repelling pests, but in my experience, it's bollocks.
Yeah.
It's actually, the insect is very intelligent, capable, and it's not going to be confused by the wafty aroma of a rosemary plant. It knows what it wants and it's going for it. But from a root health perspective, that is very true. So there is definitely companion plant value in doing that.
I didn't know that about, like, the different communities with the roots and for the organisms and stuff. That's really interesting.
It's
That's
really amazing because it's
Yeah.
actually way more complex. And just to give you a little insight, the plants, as they photosynthesize, the process of photosynthesis is using the carbon from carbon dioxide, splitting it and combining it in a new way to make glucose. They make their own energy using the sun's light. That's the light from the sun and the carbon in the atmosphere. They create sugar or glucose. Between about 30 to 6% of those glucose molecules actually go out to the root system, into the soil. Like, the plant doesn't even use them for itself. And the reason the plants do this is because those carbon feed the microbes in the soil. The microbes, the bacteria, the fungi, the protozoa, the nematodes, the arthropods, all of these little critters, they are hungry for food, some of which the plant provides them through these free sugary exudate called exude, because they exude from the roots. And so it's actually this relationship that's symbiotic. The plants grow and they send some of their energy into the root system, feed the organisms around the root system, knowing that in doing so, those organisms will exchange mineral for the plant. So the organisms are highly specialized at eating rock. Fungi, for example, vomit out acid, digest rock, extract the minerals, and give it to the plant in exchange for some of the sugars that the plant give it. So each plant is essentially in a symbiotic relationship with the community around its root system, and the soil's only as healthy as the number of living root systems in the soil. And so there's this beautiful relationship where the plant's actually able to tailor those compounds it releases from its roots to bias the kind of biology it wants living around it. It's like me recognizing that you love pizza, and I'm like, Thomas loves pizza. I'll get a pizza in and tell him I've got pizza on the table.
Yeah.
You might come round for tea.
Yeah.
And it's like they provide the foods tailored, actually chemically tailored. There are hundreds of thousands of different chemical cocktails plants release. The plants tailor them so that the microbe can be farmed essentially by the.
Yeah, that's incredible. Yeah, specifically doing it. Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It really is. I mean,
Yeah.
we're living in a microbial world.
Yeah.
Our gut, our bodies are 90% microbe,
Yeah.
10% human cell. The organism that we are is 90% non-human.
Yeah.
And so the fact that the plant world is so dominated by microbial cultures, it actually begins to beg the question of, like, are we in service to the microbe?
Yeah.
They are the ones that are giving us our cravings. They're the ones that are growing the plant.
Yeah.
Like, what's going on there?
Yeah, that's yeah, I didn't know that at all, man. That's crazy. That's so cool though. And can you, if you had bad soil, could you, like, someone's got bad soil, can they put specific plants in to try and specifically bring that soil back up to improve it? Is there specific stuff
Yeah.
people can plant?
Yeah, you can. I mean, the simple principles that we're wanting to foster in a soil that's bad, and let's define bad soil first. Bad soil would be soil that lacks organic matter, because it means that it doesn't have a nutrient holding capacity. It's like a leaky bucket, essentially, that you can't hold much because it runs out too quick. So if the soil's lacking organic matter, then it's going to be very vulnerable to drying out, and it's going to be vulnerable to not having enough nutrient to supply the plant. Another bad soil might be a soil that's been saturated, that's gone all smelly and stinky, meaning that the microbial culture is not favorable to the plant that you want to grow. Then it would be a bad soil. That can change, but at the moment it might not. If a tomato plant's in wet soil, it's going to rot, and it's going to rot because there's not enough air to support the microbes that it needs to be healthy. The other example of a bad soil would be one that's been poisoned by a toxic excess of some mineral, or an actual agricultural poison or something like that. If we've got mine sites, they might have excess copper in the soil, they might have excess zinc, so much more than naturally would ever occur, that it's toxic to the plants that grow. So for the average home gardener, most of our about bad soil is just simply soil that's lacking good mineral profile, a broad spectrum of the minerals and enough of them, and organic matter. And sometimes contaminants are a problem, but not often. So when we define bad soil for a home gardener, what we want to do is to do anything we can to improve the organic matter content, adding more materials and adding the minerals that are needed. You asked about growing plants specifically. We can use plants to improve the soil health dramatically. And the way we do that is by choosing plants that photosynthesize a lot, because they're going to put a lot of sugar into the root system. They're going to be feeding the microbes much more than some other plants.
Yeah.
So when it comes to using plants to improve the soil, we want fast growing, high yielding, and ideally they're called C4 plants. C4 is another kind of photosynthesis. I won't go there, but sorghum and corn are two really good examples of soil building plants.
Yeah, okay.
And then there's other plants that have a large root system, like oats.
Yeah.
Some cereals are really good at building carbon root systems in the soil. There's another way of boosting the soil. In terms of repairing bad soil in the garden, aside from plants, it's actually to keep putting out foliar feed to improve the health of plants that are growing, using organic liquid feeds we can make ourselves or buy.
Yeah. And can you have too much? How do you know if someone's putting too much water in their garden, or is there a way to judge the soil, test the soil, what's too much?
Well, the most effective way is to check the plants to see if the plants look happy or whether they're wilting. If they're wilting, then it's either too wet or it's too dry. If they're wilting after the sun's gone down, then it's probably too wet or very, very dry. If they regain their vigor after the sun's gone down, then it may be a lack of water. But you can put your hand in the soil and just feel it. Really, if it feels slightly moist, if you grab a handful of soil and you just feel it, if it feels dry and crumbly, like if you can't squeeze one drop, it's probably lacking moisture, probably needs a bit of moisture.
Yeah.
And if it's sloppy, it's too
much. Yeah. What's your favorite things to grow?
Oh wow, where do I start? I do have a real love. I'm just looking out my window. I have a real love of lettuce.
Yeah.
They're not the most nutritious plant, but I just think they look gorgeous. All the different colors. I love reaching down and just breaking the midrib of a lettuce and just like I just love it. It's just such a great plant. One of my other favorites is rocket, the perennial wild rocket, and these are the little leaves, also known as arugula in the state. Very tasty, quite a peppery flavor. When you grow your own, wildly different to what you buy in a bag that was normally hydroponically grown. And I love the stuff. That's my favorite salad. Every salad, I want some rocket.
I love rocket. I love lettuce too.
What's yours? What are your favorite veggies?
I'd have to say, for some reason, I think maybe just because when I was little, I used to love growing tomatoes, and I still get excited about growing tomatoes for some reason.
Good on you.
Yeah, so I mean, that was the first thing I grew when I was little, and when I was probably about 6, and I grew tomatoes and radish.
Cool.
And then I don't know, since then, I love growing tomatoes, but I love growing lettuce as well.
How do the tomatoes go in Perth?
I'm in Port Hedland.
Port Hedland, okay.
They've got a good yield this year, but usually I don't do too well out of them yet.
No, it's a bit far north. It's out of the climate. I've got the same problem here.
Yeah, but they do struggle, so that's the one downside.
Yeah, when I moved up from Victoria to New South Wales, I learned I didn't know this before, but that tomatoes are a temperate crop. They don't like the subtropics.
Yeah.
We can grow cherry tomatoes here, no problem. Amazing cherry tomatoes. There's something about the skin being different on a cherry tomato than a larger tomato, because the fruit fly just murder them up here.
Yeah.
And they don't really stand a chance.
I had pretty much garden's got over on my basil as well. That goes crazy here. So I've moved a heap of that out to start again. That just took over everything when we were away.
Yeah, and what do you do with all that basil?
Just got to share it with people. That's a good thing. So we're giving that away to heaps of people, and then we'll make them pesto, and we had that much of it. It was crazy.
That's what I love about growing our own. Like if you go into the supermarket and you buy some basil, you look for basil, and you'll find a little plastic punnet or something, and you're like, what? That's like a twig. Like I want to make pesto, man. I want to make pesto. I need a bowl full of that stuff. I need to spend $30 on basil just to make a really
Yep.
good pesto. And even then, the smell of those hydroponically grown basil versus the smell of yours that were growing in the soil in the sun, it's like there's no comparison.
Yeah, it's way different. This one we had here is you can definitely tell it's a lot better when you grow it yourself.
Yeah, yeah.
I wanted to ask you about permaculture. Do you know much about that?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's essentially the design system. It's a way of thinking. It's a way of approaching planning your landscape and planning your life. I mean,
Yeah,
permaculture is often thought of as gardening, but it's way more than just gardening. It's an approach to life
yeah,
that really cultivates the values of living as a custodian of the planet and good relationship with others, good relationship with the energy that we consume, and in our location by trying plan to maximize the use of natural efficiencies and minimize waste. So yeah, I took a deep dive into permaculture quite a few years ago, and like many, perhaps I lent much into the food growing side of it, the
yeah,
way that there's such elegance in the design system to maximize efficiency.
yeah,
It's informed a lot of what I do and how I do it in terms of how can we utilize the passive qualities of this space, be it sunlight or creating a microclimate by having a thermal mass. How can we minimize energy waste and maximize ease by planning the area well?
yeah. That's definitely something I want to learn more about. They seem to be like real passionate people who I've come across, that are into it.
Mm,
Yeah, I was gonna ask you, like, I've seen on your site, gardening ecologically is empowering. That's another thing that stood out. You do feel empowered when you're setting up your own little spot and
yeah.
growing what you want to grow, and
Yeah.
you sort of take ownership over it, and like you're taking care of it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. And it's like for me, it's the physical security of the food
yeah,
that, if the shop runs out, I wouldn't want to live on my garden. Let's be honest. I mean, I don't grow enough potatoes. I don't grow enough onions. I wouldn't be filling up on pesto without nuts. And I don't grow enough nuts. So
yeah,
there's all
yeah,
this food security is it's only a small component, but
yeah,
it's really nice to have the freshness and the
yeah,
variety and the availability and the abundance to make a real pesto by having a mountain of basil rather than twig.
yeah,
And there's something very empowering, I think, about being in relationship to the earth, recognizing our play, cultivating the soil, loving the space, getting the benefits of it.
yeah,
There's a right relationship play.
yeah.
And actually, for me, in this time too, it's like we're in a world where we're bombarded by bad news. I mean, if I just look on my phone, I'll just see, the Amazon's, on the death's door. We're mining too much, climate change crisis. The list goes on. But when I'm out in the garden, I'm actually doing something beneficial.
Yeah,
I'm cultivating beauty.
yeah.
I'm in the space where I'm enjoying the insects as I see them fly by. I'm seeing the little birds. We've just had some quail move to the garden.
Oh wow.
I've never had anything to do with quail in my life.
Yeah.
And there's these wild quail. They're just living in the understory of the veggies.
Wow.
And they're like these really skittish birds. We've only been here 2 years,
Yeah.
and it's taken this long for them to start to move into the space.
Wow.
And we're just loving it, seeing these little birds like plucking
Yeah.
around. They're only this big. They're like
Yeah.
the mini chicken. And I don't even know where they live. I haven't even worked that out. But just
Yeah.
watching them in the garden, it's just such a delight.
That's cool. Yeah, I love when you come out and you see just nature working, animals coming out into the garden, and yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
What's your goals for the Gourmet Garden School?
Well, I really want to empower more people to grow some of their own food.
Yeah.
I'm well aware that most people don't. Most people
Yeah.
don't grow food. I don't want to get hung up on the self-sufficiency thing because I do think that that's a very niche dream for many. I mean,
Yeah.
I'd love it. I'd love
Yeah.
it. But it takes a community to create that experience because I also enjoy modern convenience.
Yeah.
But I would love to empower people with the skills needed to grow really good quality food without the work. Because it
Yeah.
actually, what I've found and why I'm so passionate about this with the Gourmet Garden School is that by learning to do what's necessary to get the soil to where it needs to be, the food just grows itself. Like,
Yeah.
I won't take the credit and say I grow carrots. No, I just put the seed in. They grow. And if I've created the conditions for them to thrive and they taste amazing.
Yeah.
Versus I haven't created the conditions if I didn't know what I was doing and then they don't taste them. And I think, homegrown carrots. They're not very good.
Yeah.
And my vision is to help empower people understanding what they can do themselves in their space and how much we can do ourselves with how little we buy.
Yeah.
So where I'm really going with this is closing the loop, using all of the ingredients in our garden to fertilize the garden, to create kind of food quality that we want, that is abundant and not pest resistant and very, very cheap. Because
it's good if reusing using what you got on hand too, like you said. Just that's pretty cool.
And eventually, I actually feel myself needing to. I'm loath to use the word "get political," but I'm finding myself quite intolerant of the rhetoric that I hear, that I'm exposed to when I tune into the news. Like, who are these idiots, really? Who are these people that claim to be our leaders? I just find it abhorrent what's going on. And I look at the poisons that are getting exposed, that we're all getting exposed to. I look at the packaging and the waste, the energy use, and I would love to be more vocal about that. Even the littlest things like the tea bags I put in my compost. I haven't worked out which brand it is yet. I'm going to find out. Some of them have microfiber plastic in the lining of tea bag. Now, when I pour hot water on that tea bag, it's leaching chemicals into that tea, and I'm drinking those. Who said that was a good idea? Why isn't there a law stopping a company making tea bags out of microfiber plastic? I'm keen to start rising up a bit of an uprising here. No, enough is
Definitely
enough.
getting the right tea bags. But I agree with you. It blows my mind how people don't, I guess, take health and stuff as serious like these things. It's incredible.
I think we're all so busy, hey? Like, I don't want to be that guy that reads the labels of everything I buy. Like, I don't want to know what E number means what. Like, it's actually, I feel like there's an injustice that I'd even need to learn that to check whether there's poison in my food.
You should be able to
Poison
just
in my
trust that.
food? Like, why isn't there someone who's got a job to stop poison going in food?
Definitely. You should be able to just trust what you're buying. It's good for you. Like you shouldn't have to worry about what's in it. That's what I think. Growing your own food. Like I had the same thoughts as you. About being self-sustainable. That used to be my ultimate dream, but now it's like, okay, that's a bit far away, but I can start doing a little bit for me now.
And that's why the harvest swap's so good, because you don't need to do everything. I don't need to do everything. If you grow tomatoes and you do a great job of that, then why not swap them for some carrot? By having connection and community, we can exchange what we do, and we know the people who produce the good one, so we get the good one, and we all have a richer life for it. I think that's where we're going, and that's how we can have that self-sufficient life without having to do it all ourselves.
And it just started like I had people coming around the house when they'd visit, and they'd go, "Oh, do you mind if we get some, basil? We'll bring you some pawpaws." Like, yeah, no worries. And it just started like that. And then when we got a kumquat tree and some mangoes, and people would bring stuff over that they were growing and swap. And so I got to start a page for this.
Love it.
Yeah.
Now there's 100.
It's hard to keep up with. Like
I bet.
a couple of them I got to good levels with enough people being admins and moderators, so I just sort of leave them
Beautiful.
run themselves, and then I can focus on the other ones. That's when I get them all up to a certain level. And then I'll focus on the one where I'm living.
No, you're doing a great job.
Thanks. I always love seeing your posts come up too. I love what you're doing with people who are affected with the floods.
Thank you.
Could you talk about that for people who don't know?
Well, so there were the floods here on the East Coast. There was actually two in a row, like one at the end of February, then one at the start of March, or maybe it's the start of February. I forget now. Anyway, there were two floods very close together. And, it became obvious to me that my soil here in my garden was saturated. And I was like, wow, this is actually very difficult to grow food in and to understand what to do. It was pushing my level of understanding. And I thought, there's going to be heaps of people like not knowing what to do here, especially for the people who flooded and had contaminants in the flood water, and they don't know if their food is safe to grow in. And so I've got environmental science background. I understand this stuff, and I work as a soil analyst as well, which is the fancy term given to someone who can look at a soil report and understand what parts per million mean, and understand how, if manganese is at 27 parts per million, it's low or it's high or whatever, and I can prescribe minerals that will balance that soil to supply what's missing and manage the excess. And so I thought, actually, would be really nice just to help people here. And I decided to put together a Zoom call, and I did like a presentation, and that went for about an hour and a half. And I had it was about 50 people sign up, and after it, I had quite a lot of people saying, "Oh, I saw that call. Is there a recording?" Yep, here's the recording, and I sent it out. And I realized I was starting to get a few questions come through, and I realized there was actually a lot more demand for it and for more detail than gone into. So I decided to put together a 5-part series, and I took some video. My house nearly flooded as well. I literally had my house on a little island of water, and I took some drone footage of that, and I put it into a little video, and I just said, look, I'm going to share this free series for anyone who's struggling with excess water. And I ran that every 3 days for 5 sessions, and it ended up about 7 or 8 hours content, which is online. It's available on YouTube still to watch. And that was great. I had about 350 people sign up and watch that. And it was then in about June, we had some more big rains down south and affecting Sydney and north, like Central Coast. And I decided, because the series had been so good, but it was long, like 7 hours. Who's got time to watch 7 hours of a guy banging on about soil? No one. So I'd get the odd email from people who say, I've watched your series, and I'd go, well done. Like, seriously, you're obviously committed, because not everyone finished. So I decided to put together a short e-course on it. So I've got an app called the Gourmet Gardener, and I decided to put a short e-course for free in the app that people can access, so that anyone who's struggling with saturated soils or flood affected soil can understand what they need to do to take their soil from where it is to where it needs to be. And it's only 90 minutes. It's, I could talk for 8 hours as I demonstrated. It's condensed, but it's a bit more of a bite-sized thing, people.
No, that's cool. I'll definitely put the link for it too, and get that out for everyone. I'm going through all the different groups on you. And no, that's cool stuff, man. Yeah, that's cool. It's been great talking to you.
Yeah, same. Thanks for chasing me up to organise it.
Yeah, no worries. We'll have to get another one together one day.
Yeah, okay, sure.
We'll tackle some different stuff if you're happy to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I love talking about this stuff.
Yeah, cool. What would your thoughts be on using one last thing, I guess, like your chook poo and all that stuff for fertilizers? Is that like as beneficial as, your worm castings and stuff like that? Or are they all different type?
Manures are typically quite rich in nutrient.
Yep.
Each type of manure, it differs, and each type of manure also differs according to the diet of the animal that gave birth to that manure. So with regards to chicken manure, if those chickens were free roaming chooks, they would have a very different nutrient profile in the manure than if they were fed grain. And the reason is that grain accumulates zinc and also manganese, and the chook manure is much higher in zinc as a consequence. So manures can be amazing, but if your soil needs those things, and if not, then they could actually be toxic from the perspective that chook manure is a great example. Very high in zinc, very high in phosphorus. If your soil needs zinc and phosphorus, chook manure will be like a salve to the wound. It would be amazing. You'll put chook manure on, everything will grow better. You'll be like, oh my God, chook manure is the answer to my gardening problem. But your neighbor, who's been putting chook manure on for 10 years, will tell you chook manure is not a good thing. And for him, it's not, because he's overdosed his soil with phosphorus and zinc, and with too much of those minerals, he's getting all sorts of problems in his garden. So manures are awesome, but only a little bit if they're needed. And if they're not needed, this is where it gets different. No, we can't see them. We don't know without a soil test. So I would say use a little bit and not too much.
Find that balance.
Like chook manure every year, bad news. Do it once, give it a couple of years, add a bit more, no worries.
No, that's good to know. That's something I wanted to know as well.
Whereas the worm castings and the compost, they are much less strong. They're not extreme with their nutrient profile. They might be high in some minerals, but they're not extreme. Manures can be extreme.
Yeah, okay. That's good to know. And before we finish, do you have a sort of message you want to send out, or I guess a closing?
I will say, if you're not growing some of your own food at home, you really are missing out in a big way. Unless you don't eat food. If you're not a food eater, then maybe not. But for anyone that eats food, if you haven't grown your own or tried your own or tried food that was homegrown, it really is something worth exploring. And to understand that the vast majority of the food that we buy in the shop, grossly nutrient deficient, is a shadow of what it is capable of being in terms of flavor, aroma, texture, and storage quality.
Perfect. Nice. We'll finish up with that then.
Awesome. Thanks, Thomas.
No worries. Thank you.
Awesome. No worries. All right. Take
See
it
ya.
easy.
See ya.
See ya.